So we're hosting tonight both ACC Vancouver and ACC Squamish. I am actually a member of both sections, but primarily work with ACC Squamish now since I live here in Squamish. Many thanks to Belinda and Rob, my co-hosts for tonight, and for getting all of this happening with us. Right, so some of the stuff we will cover is when and where to go for your first backpacking trips, key pieces of gear. We have some show and tell happening as well. How to set up your camp, food and water, and keeping it safe from critters, and staying clean and healthy in the backcountry. So for those of you who may be new to backpacking and potentially even going on your very first backpacking trip this summer, or hopefully going out this summer, a few tips on how to choose a good location and a good time. Number one is pick a week where you're going to have good weather, or a weekend where you're going to have good weather. For your very first or among your first couple of backpacking trips, going out in the pouring rain is just going to get you wet and miserable and cold. You're going to have a much better time if you pick a weekend that has beautiful sunshine, it's nice and warm, a little bit of breeze, but not too gusty. So yeah, check the weather forecast out. Tip number two, pick a location that has really easy access, just in case there's something going wrong with your gear, your pack, your shoes, you're not used to it. So pick a location that's well within your physical abilities, maybe half the length of a typical day hike for you. A really easy to access one that I recommend up in the sea to sky if you come this way is going into Cheakamus Lake. If you can drive up to the end of the logging road, it's only a 3-kilometer flat hike to get to the camping spots. So you don't have to be particularly fit. You have all day. It's on a beautiful lake. Actually, one of the photos later in the presentation is from my partner and I camping there a couple of years ago. But basically anywhere that's relatively easy access. If something goes wrong, you can get out of there without too much trouble. Bonuses for your first backpacking trips, places that have outhouses. So any of the provincial parks have established outhouses in many of their established camping areas. Makes life wonderful. You don't have to worry about what to do with your human waste, but we will be talking about that towards the end of our presentation. Somewhere that has water handy. So lakes, creeks, all acceptable sources of water. You will probably have to treat it, but we will be talking about that later. Camping up on ridges, even though the views are amazing, you might not have water up there, which means you would then have to hike all the water you're going to need for the evening and your next morning up to your camping spot with you. And water is really heavy, so if you can avoid carrying it, even better. And cooking shelters are kind of bonus, just in case there is precipitation or wind that kicks up. But many of the BC parks, especially in Garibaldi, have cooking shelters at their camping areas. And then start out with a small trip. For your very first backpacking trip, one night's good. Hike into Cheakamus Lake or out to Elfin Lakes, spend a night, enjoy the views, hike out the next day while you're still enjoying it. That's why you go back and you're looking forward to your next trip. As you get more into the routine, you know what to bring, you know what you can leave behind, then you can go for longer trips without having to carry a massive pack. So on the topic of what to carry, I'll turn you over to Rob.
So to get started, the intro to backpacking, the namesake there is the backpack. And you want to right size the bag for the type of trip. And if starting off with just an overnight or maybe like a 2-night, like a weekend trip, you want to be able to like move through the backcountry with like all the weight that you're going to be carrying, but be comfortable, as relatively comfortable as possible while doing so. So getting like a proper fit when you're purchasing a bag and loading it up in advance to make sure that like everything you're planning to take will fit within the bag, and that you have like a system in place for like how to access like some key items that you're going to be using routinely on the trail, things like navigation aids, sunscreen, bug spray, food and water. With that, like paying attention to like an appropriate hydration system is important too, whether it's through like a hydration bladder with a hose or having an Nalgene bottle or thermos like readily accessible, so you're not digging through the pack and causing unnecessary stops. So takeaway is like the backpack should be big enough, but not too big. Like no need to carry extra weight just as like the container. One key piece of gear that should be like key set of gear that should be present on every trip, not in the list there, but the 10 essentials. So these are like the survival items that everyone should have in the group. And I'll paste links in the chat just if you want to do a deep dive there later. But these are like key survival items that whether it's a day trip or an overnight backpacking trip, you want to have some variety of these items that will like allow you to survive if like there's a emergency situation that comes up. Continuing down the list, looking at what kind of shelter is going to be used for the trip. And this is an important consideration because it can add substantially to the weight in the backpack. So it's a case of know before you go. If you're going to an area where there's like existing infrastructure in a park, like a cabin or a yurt, that like may not be as big a consideration. Maybe you're just bringing a sleeping bag and a sleeping pad. But if you are having to provide your own shelter, then this is a bigger consideration where you'd go luxurious with a spacious tent that could sleep multiple people, that is again matched to the situation and like the terrain, and we'll discuss that in a bit. But could also go on like lighter options, especially in the summer where like temperature fluctuations aren't as big a concern overnight. So having an ultralight setup with like a ground sheet, a tarp, and then having the skills to set that up in a manner where you can be protected somewhat from the elements, but trading off a bit of comfort for the extra weight savings and less gear in the bag. Having the right sleeping bag and sleeping pad combo is important too. And here looking at concerns of like how much temperature, or in the case of the sleeping pad, the like R value, how much insulation is that bag pad arrangement going to provide for you overnight when like the temperatures dip to their lowest for the day. And this will be very like dependent on the destination, the season, the like weather patterns, but again, err on the side of caution. It's easier to like delayer or open up a sleeping bag and like ventilate a bit more than to be freezing cold all night. And with experience, like matching like your own body with like whether you're like a cold sleeper or a warm sleeper with the right layering will allow you to sleep more comfortably, like matching the temperature appropriately. And on those as well, I'll mention that like you can cheat a bit with whatever a sleeping bag may be rated to by layering up and like having additional insulation beyond just the bag and the sleeping pad by like keeping layers of clothes on, having a tube, basically extending the range that you can deal with like a lighter bag, especially in the summer when the temperatures don't get too low. So a good strategy is to just wear like an insulated puffy to like around camp when you're not moving around and working up a sweat, and just wear that to bed, and you're basically having like an extra layer of sleeping bag that you're wearing to add that extra insulation. One issue of like taking too heavy a sleeping bag too will be that like you may find yourself sweating, and then that like leads to a more uncomfortable night's sleep. And if it's a multi-day trip where you're using a down bag, having to dry the bag becomes an additional logistical challenge. So it's the biggest takeaway is like as you get more experience with more nights and like different like temperature ranges, like the gear will kind of like become more intuitive as to like what works for your sleeping style. We'll get into the like details of cooking a bit later, but for any trip that isn't totally ultralight and just relying on pre-prepared meals that you're not cooking and or like treating water without boiling it, then you're going to need some sort of fuel system, stove, basic utensils, and a way to store and like transfer water and whatever you're cooking in, like most rudimentary kitchen setup you can put together. And here, like, can range from like just a spoon and fork to like a much more elaborate glamping setup, but all the weight adds up, and especially for self-propelled trips into the backcountry, there's like a lot of weight savings to be had by using equipment that is like multi-purposed and doing a lot of prep beforehand to reduce the like amount of tools for a kitchen setup that you need to bring along with you on the trip. With the topic of food, there's another key piece of gear to have a way to protect the food overnight from critters in the camp area. This is another case of know before you go, where it could be that there's an established campground where you have a designated food cache and you don't have to bring specific equipment, but it's always good to think ahead of time, like how will you be able to keep food stored overnight and not be attracting animals to like the exact location of the campsite and not have your food pilfered overnight. So having some guidelines and basic knowledge of rope craft to string up a system with like a bag to hang food between trees is like a typical go-to if like a more robust cache system isn't available. For treating water, we'll review some of the go into some of the details of options, but know what water sources are available in the area that you're heading out to, and have experience like practice at home with whatever method is being used to treat that water such that it's made potable. So this could be with like an ionization system. It could be like chemical tablets, could be boiling. There's pros and cons to each. Some people like find the taste of like chemically treated water to be like unpalatable, and that like adds to the discomfort of the trip. The like boiling water like comes at the cost of needing to transport additional fuel, but have like the idea in mind that you'll need a way to treat your water. We have noted here appropriate footwear. it's another instance of right sizing where hiking boots kind of are marketed in like different classes where there's just really light hikers like bordering on trail running shoes, which don't have quite as much ankle support or like a rigid shank for the sole. And those are all right for moving really quickly, like jogging, like going on like not too technical trails. But as the weight of the pack gets bigger, as they're like going on longer and longer trips over more days, this can be quite wearing on the ankles and the feet, and isn't like the right fit. So there are like heavier duty like backpacking boots that go up like a little higher on the ankle, or more like rigid, and just offer like better support such that you can be moving for hours on end with like a heavier pack. As you move into more challenging terrain as well, I want to like have like, you know, boots that could be purposed into like more technical scenarios, traveling on snow, possibly like using like micro spikes or like a traction aid or crampons. And these boots like have like the fastening systems for these boots should be taken into consideration. It's a bit beyond the scope of just a basic backpacking trip, but be aware that if there is snow in the trip plan, that you want to make sure that you have a good grip and support, and like a way to traverse snow slopes with the footwear. For around camp, like while you may be working up quite the sweat, like hiking into your destination, like once you're not moving and like things get a bit cooler, it's important to keep checking in with your body and like having a system of layers of clothing, from like just a t-shirt to like long sleeves to adding like two gloves, or like additional layer of pants. Basically, like think layers, and think like appropriate fibers too, where like cotton will just cool you down really well, and it's not as versatile as a polyester layer or wool. So find a system that works for you to regulate temperature, and have reserve available for the evening when you know that like the temperature is going to start to drop. Just pause here and open up the like either through chat, or if anyone wants to just call out if there's any questions regarding gear that have come up so far.
All right, so this was me. So maybe I'll do this one since I packed it. I did a couple of variations here. I only like to go 1 or 2 nights because I just don't like carrying a whole lot of gear. So in the first one on the left, we have in the big red stuff sack at the top is a great big 3-person tent for my partner and myself and my dog. It weighs 3 kilograms. It's heavy. It fills up half my pack. I hate carrying it, but my partner doesn't believe that my other tent is a 2-person tent. So be it. When I go with him, we have to bring that, the big one. The little gray thing is my Thermarest Neotherm. It's a winter sleeping pad, but it's relatively small and I use it year round. It's super warm underneath me. In the winter, I would pair it up on top of a foam pad as well for extra insulation from the snow. The big blue puffy thing is a sleeping bag. It's an old neck down barrel bag. It's rated to 5 degrees. And when I'm going with my partner, I actually sewed a polyester sheet with a zipper on, so when we can pair it up as a big double sleeping bag without having insulation underneath us, because we've got the awesome thermarest underneath. Stuff sack, I fill it up with the rest of my clothing, use it as a pillow, wrap it up in the buff with a pillowcase, a little ultralight down puffy, a rain jacket, a fleece sweater, some extra tights, extra socks. I have my jet boil, which is an awesome stove for boiling water, and that's about it. But that's okay because that's the extent of cooking I want to do on a trip. I've got dinner and breakfast. I don't actually have any lunch shown in the picture. Some toiletries, some emergency stuff, basic stuff, extra water tabs, lip balm, sunscreen, bug spray, headlamp, toilet paper, hat, sunglasses, first aid kit. In the first aid kit, there's a spare headlamp and a spare battery pack for cell phones or in reaches or whatever comms devices I'm bringing. I go with water bottles, not water bladders. I've had way too many water bladders in my life leak, so I just go with the Nalgene. If I bring a second one, it'll be a cheap 1 liter bottle from the corner store. Bear spray if I'm going into bear spray territory. Going out with my partner, we bring the hammock because there's a lot more hanging out at the lake or the destination than there is hiking. I have a bug head net here, and then this is all into a 50-liter pack. The only thing that didn't make it in is the sleeping bag. I figured I'd take the tent because I'm more fit than he is. He can get the puffy sleeping bag and put it in his bag. In the other one, the long gray cylinder, this is my lightweight tent. It's 2 pounds, like 1.2 kilograms or something like this. It sleeps 2 people, no problem, but despite my boyfriend disagreeing. I left out spare tights because if I'm just going for one night, I usually don't end up changing my tights that I've been hiking in. I just wear them for the 36 hours I'm out. I switched it up for a slightly lighter sleeping bag. And there's a slightly smaller first aid kit on this one. So this is definitely one where I'd be going somewhere I'm confident with, probably on main trail. Didn't really drop too much else from the kit though. In the blue one, if I was going out with, say, a girlfriend, I can fit it into a 25-liter pack. I had to give them the tent though, but I took the stove. And then just because the pack's not long enough for that one. So if I want to put it all into my one pack, I had to go to my 38-liter one. All right, so next slide is Belinda.
Wonderful. I am the opposite of Rob and Kathleen. So this here is an example of a pack that I would take on a multi-day trip as a trip leader. And in this, it would be, say I'm taking a youth group out, and so I'm like kind of in charge of a bunch of people's safety. And so I kind of have to be self-sufficient with all my gear and then bring extras. And then also because we're going for, say, multiple days, so say like 4 or 5 days, you're doing the Stein Valley Traverse, it's quite a bit more remote, then you need to bring a bit more stuff because you could be stuck out for quite some time. And then a few other considerations too is that it gets really, really hot there. And so you need to be prepared for really hot weather, but also potential rain because you're going out for a longer time and you might not know if there is rain, say on day 4 or 5. And there's a lot of mosquitoes there. So I'm the type of person where mosquitoes really like to bite me, even if I'm wearing bug spray, and I react really badly to mosquito bites. So I kind of almost always have to sleep in a tent because otherwise in the morning, I'm just covered in bites. You can also see in the photo what there is. So the top of my pack, I've got the things that I might need like easily. So my hand sanitizer, toilet paper. This is not very much toilet paper for that much time, but I didn't feel like making a toilet paper roll. I've got my map, hat, sunglasses, that type of stuff, and then sunscreen. So kind of easily accessible things at the top of the pack. I've got really kind of convenient side pockets. And so I kind of, the things I might need to grab, I have it off to the side here. And so yes, I do have things like a notebook for first aid reasons. And then I've got my spot and I tell everyone where that is so that they can grab it in case I'm not able to call for help. As I said, if you're going to someplace that's really hot and you might not be able to get water all the time, then I've got a 1 liter Nalgene, and then I also have a Microlight on the other side of my pack, which pretty much is like a insulated container. So it's good to keep things hot or cold. And so there's 750 mils here as well. So I'm pretty much carrying 1.75 liters of liquid, which might seem excessive, but definitely when I did the Stein Valley Traverse some years ago, I really needed it because we kept on running out of water before we got to the next place where we could get water. And so then, yeah, on the other side, I have other like things that are nice to have handy, like headlamp and knife, that type of stuff. And then in the main part of my pack, I'm definitely a bit of like a stuff everything in and just like let things fill the void. Now, because I'm the first aider in charge of the group's first aid, I do have like a full, like gigantic first aid pack. And that also just is because of like some of the policies we have in terms of what we need to carry. So yeah, that's like, you know, for an ultralight person, they'll be like, what the heck are you thinking? Anyway, some luxury items, which are nice, a little butt pad. It's also just helpful when there's a kid that's just not feeling so great and you just put it down, you'd be like, sit on this happy butt pad, and then they feel better. I have various pieces of tent. So this is a quarter dome T2 from REI, which I love for 3-season stuff because it's quite light, but it also is full mesh, so you can be inside. So I've got pieces of the tent that just get stuffed in. So there's the fly, there's the body, the footprint somewhere in there. And then of course, food. Food takes up lots of space. This is food bag number 1. And then food bag number 2 is somewhere else buried in there. So the kind of higher up would be the food that I'm going to be eating for lunch or whatever that day. And so that I just have it in a bag because it also then makes it easier for bear caching if you do need to hang, which is what this rope is for, because there aren't always bear bins at all the sites. And then I've got, because again, I have a group, I've got a pot set. So this has the big pot and the small pot, fuel inside with a little water treatment thing. The stove's somewhere else in here. Oh yeah, there it is. Pocket rocket. And then the thing that I eat my food out of, because again, we're doing a group thing, I can't eat out of the pot, collapsible bin with a spork inside. And then now I found my tent footprint, which is here. Optional, but I just find when like camping on different things, the bottom of your tent can get kind of beaten up. And I prefer carrying extra weight because it allows my tent to last really, really long. This tent is around 10 years old and I'm still using it. And it's been out for at least 100 nights, if not more. I've got my rain jacket and rain pants. Again, longer trip, no idea what the weather is going to be like. Got toiletries in a bag. I've got a bandana, which I guess it's a luxury item, but it's just so useful for different things. And then also because, again, I take out groups of youth, it has cool little prints on it. So you can look at animal tracks, but also use it as a bandana at the same time. And then in here, it seems ridiculous, but I'm a very cold sleeper and just a cold person in general. So like I've got my down puffy for a summer trip, as well as a toque and mitts and everything, because sometimes it gets really cold at night and then I am not able to sleep because I'm so cold, as well as for just around camp. So I have that. And then also in here, I have like extra socks, extra layers and everything, either for myself or for someone else in my group, extra underwear, all of that type of stuff, because we're out for multiple days. And then finally, I've got my sleeping pad, which is one of the inflatable kinds, so that saves a little bit of weight. I also have an extra tarp because sometimes if it is raining, it's good to have a covered area for everyone to sit. And so you can put something up so that people are a little bit more comfortable. But again, this is optional if you don't want that. It's also just good as like an emergency thing if you need to wrap someone up and burrito them. So if there is first aid situation, then this is really, really handy to keep someone safe, keep them comfortable, and wait until whenever you can get rescued. Oh, here's my second bag of food. So yeah, this I pack a little bit lower down and towards the board of my pack, so that the heavy weight sits closer to my back. So this would be the stuff that I wouldn't really eat right away. There's the tent poles, looking for those. And then at the very, very bottom is my sleeping bag in a compression sack. This is, I think, a -5 or -7 bag. And yes, I use that in the summer, again, because I have tropical bloodline. My ancestors are from the equator. And so for me, 20 degrees feels actually quite cold. So when it gets down to even 15 degrees, which is considered very, very warm by, say, Canadian standards, it's actually quite frigid for me. And I think actually that is everything. So Rob, you're wondering what the heck I packed in my pack. Well, that's all of it. And then the question about the weight of this pack, it's probably like in the high 30s. Like this is, it's probably under 40 pounds, but pushing 40 pounds. So in terms of like carrying my like a third of my body weight or something, it is getting close to that. And as a smaller person, it's just something I've gotten used to. And yes, I do have bear spray somewhere hanging off my pack as well.
Thanks, Belinda. So my approach here splits the difference in that in many ways it's not quite as ultralight as Kathleen set up, but some of the communal items that could have been shared with the partner are like all having to fit in the one pack. So on the left here, you can see this is a loadout for, say, an alpine overnight trip in the summer where temperatures are perhaps dipping down to freezing, but like generally fair weather is expected. The down bag there in the back is rated to 0 degrees, and that can be supplemented for a bit more warmth with an emergency bivvy shelter, the little orange item in the center. I've got a lightweight puffy that I can wear to sleep as well. There is Thermarest Neo Air and a ground sheet that has like a reflective foil on one side to, again, try to add a bit more heat or heat retention. But no tent as such, just a sill tarp that would be strung up with guy lines and possibly using some terrain features or like a like makeshift rock wall to provide protection from the elements. There's some stuff sacks here as well to better make use of like the internal space of the backpack. Extra layers, 2 gloves, arm warmers, a hat, and a lightweight hard shell that would be useful as like a rain jacket. I also have the MSR pocket rocket as a stove in this setup with the fuel, the isobutane fuel canister that like sits inside the mini pot. So it's all like a nesting doll of a setup for the like cooking component. I have a total like water carrying capacity of 2.5 liters. That's 1 liter Nalgene, which I've included as like attached to the hip belt with a little carrying case. So it's not eating up a large amount of room inside the pack, but also a 1.5 liter bladder system. And I think I wanted to mention with this approach in treating water by using chemical tablets, there is a time delay that the tablet needs to you need to wait for the chemical disinfection to do its thing. So having multiple containers for water can allow you to like rotate out what water container is currently being like treating the water to make it potable versus what you can continue to drink from while you move on to camp or the next water source. This setup uses dehydrated food, so I'm just really boiling water to like rehydrate and eat out of the either like a foil packet for the meal or a little like squishy bowl with a spork. There is a rudimentary first aid kit there, toiletries, 10 essentials. There's an InReach device as well for emergency communication. Just to note, Christian, in addition to the Spot or InReach or Zoleo or a sat phone, like the first line for emergency communication should also be, as part of the 10 essentials, a whistle and like a signaling device. So there's a compass there that has a mirror on it for visual signaling, along with a whistle that's built into the pack. So those are some additional considerations. I think that's about all I have to say for, there isn't like an independent rain cover for this bag that I've brought, but I do have like orange garbage bags in that loadout that can provide protection if it's getting stuck in a storm. And yeah, when it's all packed, like like that 32 liter pack is totally like at capacity, but there's nothing that's really dangling off that isn't like well secured. And that's I guess a personal recommendation of mine, that I've seen people wanting to like lash too much stuff onto the outsides of their pack, and like unless you're really like methodical about it and use like webbing and carabiners and like have a good system, it's just an opportunity to get some of this equipment snagged and torn or like accidentally dropped on the trail. So try to come up with a packing system that utilizes the interior space of the bag as best as possible, and like be consistent with like, okay, what zippers, which compartments, like where do you keep what, and like develop a system that works for you, that you like apply consistently trip to trip. In this pack in particular, the brain, or like the top compartment that folds up and forward, that's where I keep the like anything that I want to access with just like a brief break on the trail. Things like sunscreen, lip balm, I have like a multi-tool in there, like things that like I wouldn't want to have to dig around in the pack for any extended period of time. So.
And as we were doing this, Rob and I got talking a little bit about ultralights, and I set a challenge for myself. I have a 15-liter day trip pack that I shoved full with overnight stuff. Now, this is very condition dependent, but I'm going to unpack it, and you guys can tell me what you think and whether you would take it out or not. So I would just bring a pair of water bottles like this. They're about 600 mils. There's little stretchy pockets on either side. If I know there's a ton of water where I'm going, I might bring one. And if I want the bear spray, bring the other. But the bear spray may very well get left behind on this kind of a trip. I do have a hip pocket that's empty. So things like lip balm, sunscreen, or trail snacks can go on the outside. I haven't used my other pockets just because I find that when I shove the stuff on the inside of the pack, it takes up the space of the pockets. It's not a brain, so it's either or. All right, so coming out of the 15-liter pack, the buff's exploding out already. And here's my ultralight down puffy. There's no hood on it, which is too bad because hoods on puffy jackets are amazing. Here's my little, this is the brain bag that doesn't actually live in the brain of the bag. So it's got my headlamp, it's got toilet paper, doggy bags, hand sanitizer, sunscreen stick, lemonade packet, so that taste of the chemical treatment, we can disguise it once it's done. Chemical treatment for my water, emergency bar because I always have it with me. So this little bag goes between all my packs, and then lip balm. I'm gonna shove that back in because it actually has to be ready to go into the next pack I fill up. And I got my toiletries. Heck, I even left my little mini deodorant in it. Bag of food, so I'm just packed for one dinner and breakfast, but got lots of coffee in there, remembering my spoon. This is the jet boil. My lid always pops off, but I'll show those of you who haven't seen it, the stove. So it's a system. So I've got inside the pot, there's the fuel, there's a fuel stand. Here's the stove part of it. Here's my cup for the trip. And then this connects to directly to the bottom of the pot. So they're really fast, really fuel efficient. A little bit bulkier than the Pocket Rocket. I do have a pocket, well, the Pocket Rocket's the one that I had a stove fail last year that it didn't attach, but I have it with a 600 ml pot that I can fit the Pocket Rocket, a mini fuel, all of that into the pot, which was my smallest stove system, which I would love to have in here, but alas. This is my little sleeping bag. It's only rated to about plus 10 degrees, but I have slept outside in it at plus 10 and that was okay. Lovely part about that one, it undoes into a big quilt, so you could share it with a partner. And then I decided to go with, rather than a sleeping pad or any other kind of shelter, I decided to go with the hammock for sleeping on. So there's no insulation under me, but with this particular sleeping bag, I can wrap it around and outside my hammock. So I'm kind of burritoed in the hammock inside a sleeping bag. So I do have 360-degree insulation around me. So that fits into 15 liters.
Okay, so setting up camp. Start by saying that if it's your first time going out camping overnight in the backcountry, having an objective in mind that isn't overly ambitious is important to like make that experience a good one. And I would say that trying to find a destination where there is an established campground or like campsites that are managed in some way is like just like a good first step in that. There may be more hoops to jump through as far as like booking a spot or like having to contend with more crowds, but these are helpful too in that like there you won't be as like far afield from help if something does go wrong. Often there are like, if there's an established like designated tent pads for setting up in like a well-frequented area, like perhaps at like Garibaldi Lake. There's also like cook shelters there, and there are like lots of ways to mitigate like unforeseen challenges. Like if a storm rolls in, there are like, again, more people around that could like help in an emergency situation. So that would just be my like personal advice to start off small and like progress like further afield as you like dial in your own system. So with setting up camp, we want to like do a lot of like work systematically as we like find that campsite, whether it's at like a designated like tenting spot or like somewhere remote in the backcountry. The first thing is that you want to leave enough time in your trip plan in the day. Like it's much easier to stay organized and set up a camp while you still have daylight. And likewise, like factor in time in the morning for whatever objective remains in the next day to take apart camp. And this isn't just to make sure that you know, like set things up as comfortable as possible, but also you want to have want to adhere to like leave no trace principles and like not cut corners where like you're not being the best steward that you can be with like leaving the site the way it was when you found it. Finding a durable surface, if there's a designated tent pad, then often it's just like clearing whatever debris like may interfere with the ground sheet or the bottom of the tent. But if it's a more remote location, then like finding the perfect spot to like lay out the footprint of your tent maybe like may not present itself, but like there are trade-offs between like hunting out like a perfect spot to like for the ground cover versus having protection from the elements with like trees or rocks around like for the campsite. Also choosing to camp directly on the ground versus on snow. There's trade-offs there, whereas like snow can more readily provide a like a smooth surface, but you will have to use a different strategy for staking out any like guidelines or like tarp or fly that like you may need like different staking technique than when like hammering pegs into the ground. And we'll have to contend with snow melt and the like colder temperature underneath. It's perhaps helpful to mention that tents are marketed with like being like in addition to the number of people that they will sleep, they're like a 3-season tent or a 4-season tent, a double wall tent or a single wall tent, and like what are the difference here? So for like introduction to backcountry purposes, a typical 3-season tent with a good fly. So these are almost always like double wall tents. That's going to be sufficient for 3 seasons: the shoulder season of spring and fall, and then in the summer as well. And these tents will provide adequate shelter for like fair weather conditions and for storm conditions where it's like above freezing and there's rain. But not necessarily all storm conditions, in that they are not built with as many like tie down points and rigged for guy lines, such that incredibly strong winds may make cause the fly to invert or otherwise not allow the whole self-support system to maintain its shape. So if there is high winds or unseasonable snow in the forecast, then that may be a good indication that it's time to look at a 4-season tent for the objective. Double wall tents are also while there is a bit of additional weight to have a inner wall and then a fly, with often the inner wall being made in part or in the majority with mesh. This allows for like better airflow and like less condensation in situations where it's like remains above freezing throughout the cycle of the night. So they tend to be more comfortable, and that you can like wake up in the tent in the morning and you're not contending with a lot of condensation that's then you have to manage and like dry out gear before you like pack everything up. The advantages to single wall tents, though, are that like all things, all else being equal, like there's less material that you're carrying, so you have potential weight savings. They tend to work best though in like cold, dry environments. So like the summit tents for like extreme mountaineering objectives, and typically used in the winter when like the like ambient temperature is below zero. And then there's also options for a bit more of a like minimalist approach using tarps, just a ground sheet, bivy bag, and these approaches will require a bit more consideration, like selecting a location to prevent exposure to the elements. If trees are needed to like rig up guy lines for a tarp, or like two opposite ends for like a hammock. These are things that you have to like be on the lookout for as you like select your camp spot. In addition to like the like physical location of where the tent will reside, you can also add additional protection from the elements by like modifying some of the like surrounding natural environment. So often in the alpine, where there aren't like trees and foliage to provide a windbreak, you'll see like a cairn, but it like has expanded to like a rock wall that will like serve as a windbreak for like the side of a campsite that where the like predominant wind is coming from. So this is like an effective strategy to make the like campground more comfortable and reduce wind, like especially for when you're cooking. But this will add more time in like the like camp preparation, like at the end of the day. So keep that in mind too. With the tents that are like either not self-supporting or just the fly element needs to be like staked out away from the main tent body, don't like cut corners here. Do a good job of like ensuring that like the tent is like taut and like laid out to like the specifications of like how it's intended to be constructed. Because like even if it's a nice calm serene evening when you're setting up camp, could result like could end up having like gale force winds coming in overnight, and it's only then that you realize that the like vestibule like fly piece is just like flapping in the breeze and keeping you up at night, and that's like you don't want to get out of that warm sleeping bag to have to deal with it. So do it right the first time. And related to having like plans to camp on the ground versus snow, like having the either the right stakes, like there are like specific snow stakes that work better in snow than in dirt, or improvise with like materials found in the field. But for all these elements that you're like using in nature to craft like a more comfortable campground, it's important to like return these elements to like a natural state when you're leaving camp the next day or whenever it may be. And this is all the more important when camping in like non-designated like on like non-designated tent pads, and like you're using your own best judgment to like find a spot that's right for your tent, but like if that spot gets used over and over again, and like even like minor changes in like the natural environment like build up over time. So it's really more about like leave no trace principles than we can get into tonight, but it's important to have that mindset that like it's not just about like packing out your own like litter and like being self-sufficient with waste management, water treatment, and whatnot. It's about like having respect for the like natural environment and not wanting to disturb it. I think that's all I had for this slide. I'll include a link to the Leave No Trace organization, which gives a bit more of a deep dive into some of the principles for like virtuous campcraft. Kathleen or Belinda, anything else to add?
I'm just looking at the photo I have on here. So this is taken at Cheakamus Lake, and we are camping on an established site, but we are really close to the water, which tends to be a very sensitive area. So if this was a wild campground, if it wasn't already established, you would not want to camp that close to the water. Plus, in addition to the environmental sensitivity of it, there's just a lot of humidity that comes up off the water that then condenses inside your tent overnight. So we had a really wet inside of our fly in the morning. That is the lightweight 2-person tent. And yes, I have taken that out. As you were talking about gale force winds come up overnight. We had hurricane force winds come up overnight in the Alpine. That was not the tent to be in, and I did not get any sleep as I literally held the poles of the tent so that it didn't collapse on me. But yeah, didn't do anything the next day other than sleep in the tent.
Okay, food and water. We have touched on a number of these things already, and so I'll just review them a little bit, and then we'll have a bit of a show and tell of what you can do with food and water. So the first thing is, as we mentioned, water needs to generally be treated to be drinkable, especially in more summer type locations, because you have lots of animals pooping in your water sources and you do not want to consume that. So the ways that you can treat your water include boiling, which uses more fuel, or these types of chemical treatment tabs. And then also there's filters or UV pens. And so we'll show some of that once I get through some of this content. And for treating water, it really depends on your preference. I'd say in terms of versatility and weight, I really like just using the tabs because they don't really add too much weight to my pack. And I can just take the approximate number of tabs that I need, but some people, they really don't like that taste, and so they prefer the filter or say the UV pen or to boil it. With the tabs, you do have to wait either somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes or more for your water, and so that's where it's helpful to have 2 containers so that while one is being treated, you can consume the other. While that gets empty, then you can start consuming the one that is already treated. Now for food, we touched a little bit about different ways to protect your food from animals. If it's an established campsite, it likely will have a bin or a place for you to hang up your food. Most of the summer places that we go to, especially around here, there will be bears. If not bears, there's a lot of other critters that are going to want to get your food. If it is a place that doesn't have any type of ways to stash your food, then you can do something that is known as a bear hang. And so this is just an example of what that can look like. So you would be looking for a tree or 2 trees where you can get some rope up. So normally you use a water bottle or a rock or something to get that rope over the tree. And then from there, you hang your food. So that could be just in like, that's what I like, really like these dry sacks because they're quite durable, and then you can just hang that off of the rope. And you just have to make sure that it is high enough off the ground so that, say, a bear can't reach up for it, but also to be low enough below the tree branch or suspended between 2 trees at a distance so that they can't swap at it. And one thing about bear hangs is that they don't always work. Even when I've done a textbook bear hang with all the right distance and everything, a bear still figured out how to get it because it managed to hit the rope enough times that the rope wrapped around the tree. So this was a single tree hang because I didn't have any other tree options. And it wrapped around enough time. So it did that probably for almost an hour, that the bag got onto the tree branch, and then the bear got into it. And so that was all of my food gone with the bear hang. So that's just life. You have to deal with it. And there are some new products that have come out, which are things like this earth sack or bear barrels and stuff like that, where it's just a little bit more protection, where bears have really, really good sense of smell, so they will smell these things. And apparently with the earth sack, I haven't used it before, but the reviews seem to be pretty good, that the bears would go and try to scratch at it and try to get at it, and they can't get in. So I think next time, if I do need to do a trip where I don't have a bear kind of box or a designated hang facility, I'm going to try something like that. And we're going to show some of the things that we have for being able to do our water treatment. So I'll invite Kathleen to start if you want to show what you have for water treatment.
All right, so like Belinda, I typically use the tablets just because they're light and convenient. But if I'm going somewhere where there's liable to be a lot of silt in the water, or it might be murky, so like if you're going to be relying on tarns in the alpine that may not have had water flowing through them for a few weeks, that's the scenario where I'd want to bring my water filters, one of them. So this one is the Platypus Gravity Works filter. So this is a dirty water bag. Fill it up, attach it to the hose. Hose goes through the filter. Second part of the hose goes into whatever clean water container you want to have. And you get to hang it up on a tree or a rock, or stick it on the top of your pack with your other bottle on the ground. And then just gravity takes the effort and does it for you. The other one I use sometimes if I just want something really small, I'd more take this for a day trip than an overnight one, is the Sawyer mini squeeze system. So it just screws on to, you fill this one up in the river, screws on, and then you squeeze it out. You can, in theory, drink through it, but it takes a lot of suction to pull the water through. So you just kind of roll it up and squeeze it out into another water container. I've never gone for boiling in the summer, but it's something I will do in the winter. So for example, on the Spearhead Traverse, we have to melt the snow anyways to turn it into drinking water. There's so many people out there. Most of them, unfortunately, don't pack out their waste. So I am definitely boiling my water out on the Spearhead before I drink it. Rob.
Oh, you're stealing my thunder, Kathleen. I was going to explain my potable water source would be to, as an example, to boil like sus water or snow melt. And then like considerations with that, as you mentioned, like, okay, if you're drawing from a tarn, like, is there, like, do you have a large enough like container to boil in where it can like separate out or filter, like to actually get clean water, like separate from debris. Also, as you move higher in elevation, the boiling point will be at like a lower temperature. So that's another consideration, that like to actually like effectively kill off pathogens, you need to like boil the water for longer, because it's actually not reaching the like 100-degree Celsius when it like actually like first starts a rolling boil. And all of that takes fuel. So there's a trade-off there with like no additional apparatus from what you're using to cook, but you may end up like losing any potential weight savings because like taking that much longer running the stove and burning fuel. So I find that this is like the solution that I use in the winter, and then I like rely more heavily on the like chemical water treatment tablets and like a rotating like water container system to like keep treating on the go as I'm backpacking in the summer.
Should add in with the filters is they cannot freeze. If you think your filter has frozen, you will want to replace it, because when they freeze, the water expands and it breaks all the little pieces that actually do the filtration work within the filter. And the other thing that's really important with them is to back flush them with water with a little bit of bleach in as soon as you get home, so that if there's anything that got caught in the filter, you've killed it, you flushed it out, rather than letting something potentially grow inside your filter.
And so I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more about just in general what stove. So again, whichever stove you like the most is definitely the one that you should use. And if there is, say, mostly I think in like colder conditions, a white gas stove tends to perform a little bit more consistently because you can regulate the pressure. However, at the same time, generally with a isopro stove, you can get more out of your fuel. So generally, for instance, with the same amount of fuel, you'll be able to boil more water using an isopro stove, especially something like a jet boil, compared to white gas. However, there are different things you can do to make your stove more efficient. So one thing that you can do if it's a white gas stove, which actually maybe, Rob, you can show us your white gas stove. Let me just spotlight you so you can show that off. Of course, put you on the spot. So you can use a windscreen. So Rob has something like that. I have one here, and those go together. So that helps with saving some fuel. And when it comes to even the isopro stoves, there's the things like the Pocket Rocket where it's just a canister stove where the fuel attaches to the bottom here. But there's also isopro stoves where it comes with a line. So the advantage of this is your fuel canister can be over here, and then you can put your windscreen around your stove. And this one here is just a homemade windscreen. I used some aluminum foil trays and did some cutting and folding to make it. So super light, and it definitely makes a really big difference, especially when you have an area with a lot of wind, and you can get a lot more out of your fuel that way. So yeah, that's the main thing with kind of those two types of stoves. If you're more interested in, say, cooking with your stove or like a more comfortable camp. So I've gone on trips with people where we had a bake packer oven and we're actually not just boiling water. Then the white gas stoves I find are helpful for that because it doesn't tend to burn your food as much. There's more temperature regulation. Whereas the isopro stoves, it's on or it's off. There's not much in between. Things get burned very, very quickly. One way to mitigate that for the isopro stove is you can use something like this. So this here, it just helps spread the flame out so that you don't get as much burning, but then you have to pack it. So it's kind of like how much of a foodie you really want to be when you're out there. And then related to the food itself, I usually do a combination of some of the more freeze-dried stuff and then some homemade stuff. And this is an example of something that's a little bit more homemade. So bring whatever you're comfortable eating and what you like to eat. And if anyone wants some backcountry recipes for DIY type stuff, feel free to reach out to me. That's kind of like my jam. So this here is a homemade vegetarian shepherd's pie mix that I created myself based on ingredients that I got from a grocery store. And it's quite light and very versatile. You just have to add boiling water to it. But the cost of this is a fraction of the foil bag things. And then also for me, just to reduce waste, I can reuse these Ziploc bags over and over again versus those ones you have to buy a new bag. every single time. So that's something that you can also play around with the type of food you want, the weight that you want, and then almost also how much you want to pay for all of that. And then now what we're going to do is just going to move on to a little bit of hygiene. And I understand it's already 8:30, so some people might drop off, but those who want to stay, we're going to talk a little bit about the most fun topic, which is how to poop in the woods. Things with hygiene. So the first thing we talked about it already is pack it in, pack it out. So that's not really hygiene, actually. That is just being, I guess, leave no trace. So if you have something, bring it back out with you, or if it's food, just eat it. Now, if there are things related to washing, pooping, and peeing, the main thing is make sure you do it far away from a water source. So the guidelines around 70 meters is if you have wash water, spread it out or scatter it so that you're spreading out the contamination. If you're peeing, you can pee on just about like any type of surface. Again, just keep it away from a water source. If you're pooping, if you are in a non-alpine area, then you can dig that into the ground. So that's 15 to 20 centimeters deep in a cat hole. But the toilet paper, make sure you pack that part out. You don't want to bury the toilet paper because it won't decompose. So always have a little baggie that you can use to carry out the toilet paper. If you are in the alpine, then do not poop in the alpine. Do not poop onto a glacier, please, because that is just going to stay there forever. Instead, use something, what we call a wag bag, or some other people, they would have like a tube or just something to hold their poop. And so poop into that and then carry it out. So that's just something you have to consider when you're thinking about your weight, is that yes, you're going to be decreasing your weight in food, but you're also going to be increasing your weight in poop when you're traveling in an alpine environment. Now, one thing is really, really important, which I cannot emphasize enough, because a lot of people think, oh, we're just out in the backcountry, we don't have to clean our hands. You absolutely do need to clean your hands, especially before you're eating and then after you poop, because most of the time you get a gastrointestinal bug, it's not because your food is bad, it's because you ate your own poop or someone else's poop. That's just the reality of what it is. So make sure you use your hand sanitizer. I think now people are more aware of those types of things, but it's absolutely, absolutely important to make sure you're keeping your hands clean, because having any type of gastrointestinal bug, besides being really, really painful, like it actually might mean that you have to get evacuated because you just can't move, or you are getting so dehydrated and that type of stuff. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on, mostly because I feel like it doesn't get talked about very much, is managing menstruation in the backcountry. And so some of the stuff, it's a bit more applicable for those with female reproductive organs, but it's good for everybody to know and be aware of. So for any types of menstrual products, such as pads and tampons, please pack those out. Do not put them anywhere. Even with tampons, they're like toilet paper, they won't decompose. So those do need to be packed out. Now, if you don't feel like carrying those things around, then you could use things such as menstrual cups. And so for that, you can kind of treat it like poop, where you can put it into an outhouse or you can dig it into a cat hole. So that's a way to avoid carrying the extra weight. And then other things you can think about is, if you kind of have a fairly regular cycle, then you can try to plan your trip around your menstrual cycle. Or there are also some birth control options such as IUDs or extended cycle pills, where it can either make your period quite a bit lighter or not happen at all, or be delayed to a more convenient time. So those are all things that you can do to either manage your menstrual cycle as it's happening out in the field, or be able to change it up so that you don't have to deal with it while you're out in the backcountry. And then also related to that, and this is again more for those with female reproductive organs, just because of anatomy and everything, is prevention of urinary tract infections and yeast infections, which can be really, really painful. I have had both before in backcountry situations, and I really wish that it does not happen to anyone. And the main thing with that is prevention. It can also affect those with male reproductive organs. It's just the occurrence is much lower. And the key thing is changing your underwear regularly, keeping yourself dry, and then just cleaning yourself. So you can use stuff, you can pack just like a few of these types of wet wipe things. You don't have to take the whole package. If you're out for a day or 2 or 3, just take like 1 or something like that, and just keep yourself clean. And you'll be really, really happy to not have to experience the pain of a UTI or a yeast infection, especially when you're out somewhere where you have to walk out for an entire day or 2 or more. And then you're also like, well, I don't really need an evacuation for this, but it's just not the most fun thing to do.